Howard Darby. I've been shooting fast draw for about 30 years now, and one of the things I often hear from people is a little confusion as to what is a fast draw and what is a fast time in the sport of fast draw. People have heard all sorts of times from 0.02 of a second to 4 or 5 tenths of a second, and hearing that's fast and not understanding what the differences are. So I'm going to give a little demonstration today of the types of fast draw and the different times you might have heard, so you can get an idea of what really is fast and what that means in the different types of fast draw. Now I'm shooting in my basement tonight, so I actually won't be shooting at real target. I will be shooting off a few small blanks and giving a demonstration of what those draws are all about. Now I'm going to start with some of the fastest shots you've heard about. In fast draw, it's most important to know that fast draw is a reaction sport. We're reacting to a random start signal before we can draw fire and hit the target. That makes it even for everybody. Everybody's on an even playing field. You have to react to the light and draw fire. And one of the most regulated sports when it comes to reaction is the sprinters, 100-meter dash. Their feet are in blocks, and if they move their foot faster than 0.1 of a second or 1/10 of a second after the gun goes off, they are disqualified. They're given a false start. The fastest sprinter ever that was recorded was 0.101 of a second. Surrey Brunin in 1999 at the World Championships managed to react in 0.101, fastest reaction ever recorded. And they record every start of a race for every sprinter. So that pretty much will give you the fastest humanly possible is about 0.1 of a second. That means once that light comes on, if you're doing it right, you may be able to react in 0.1 of a second, and then from there you're going to add on your draw time. Now, one time that's often talked about is a 0.02 of a second. That is done using off the button. I'm going to demonstrate what off the button is all about. Now, the off the button draw is one that we never do in competition. It's an exhibition draw. It's one that people do to try and show how fast they may be drawing the gun. But in fact, you can actually trick it by holding onto the button and keeping it pushed down while you draw the gun out of the holster, and then all you're doing is recording the time between letting go of the button and pulling the trigger to fire the gun. Now let's do a little bit of a close-up on this. I don't have a button here to try it, and I don't use it in competition. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to simulate it using the tripod here. Now the way this draw is done is you keep your finger on the button, and as you're drawing, you twist your hip to get the holster out from under the gun, cock the gun as you're bringing it in line. As you get it in line with the target and out of the holster, you just let go of the button and go on to the trigger and pull. I'm going to do a little demonstration here. I have a Westerner speed timer fast draw timer. It'll wirelessly transmit the times to the display on the wall. What I'm going to display here or demonstrate here is how fast just going from the button onto the trigger, if you've got practiced this enough that you're pretty smooth at it. I'm going to hold this down until I get the right reading on the clock. Here we go. Now that's 0.022 of a second, which is 2/100ths of a second. And that's often what you hear as the world record sort of times. That's a pretty good time for getting it off the button. You can do it even faster. I've gotten down to 0.01 when I was testing it earlier. But that's how people get the times of 0.02 of a second, or times around 1 or 2/100ths of a second. Now let's get into the fastest style of fast draw. It's called twisting. It's used in open style World Fast Draw Association contests and a couple other fast draw associations. Now twisting uses a very large boot on the holster, and the gun is actually out from the body a little ways. Now these open style competitions are only used about 10 to 20% at the WFDA contests. Most of them are traditional style, which doesn't allow twisting, but if it does, this is the fastest way to get a single action revolver out and in use. What happens is the twisting comes from two parts of the draw: twisting the hip to get the holster out from under the gun, and twisting the gun. If you hold the gun like that and just turn your wrist, you can see it goes from being down to straight out the target. And that is the fastest way to get the gun up. Instead of doing a bending of the wrist motion, it's just that motion. That's faster than a flick of the gun up like that. The way that looks is like that. There's no delay in starting for the hammer. The gun is drawn and you actually go for the trigger and the hammer at the same time and fire it. If you've got the right combination of speed between both hands, it'll go off just as it clears the top of the holster. Now, the fastest time ever fired in competition in twisting is at .208 by Ernie Hill. Competition times you'll see twisting is usually about 22, 23, up to 2600ths of a second. Now I'm going to give myself a try here. The light will come on. I don't know when it's coming on, a random start. When it comes on, I'll draw fire and we'll see what the time is on the display up there. Now 256, just around a quarter of a second. Practice it, have a good reactions, you can get down to the low twos. Now the next fastest style of fast draw is what's called world fast draw traditional style, as opposed to the open style. Traditional style, the holster must be a lot more constricting, has to be against the body, and the gun cannot turn sideways. It has to come straight up and down. Now the fastest way to do that is what's called the dump draw, where you draw the gun out of the holster and fire it just as you come level with the holster. It dumps back out of the holster. That's done like that. There's a couple ways to do that. One is to follow the gun out and then fan the hammer when it's in line. Or what a lot of people do is cock the hammer as it's coming out of the holster, come back and pull the trigger as it gets in line. And that style looks like that. Now the fastest time ever fired in competition using the World Fast Draw traditional style is .236 by Ed Thielke. Now those world records are often set in optimal conditions, a little dark, quiet. In most competitions you got the sun shining on the target. You're not going to have perfect situation, and what you'll normally see in competition about a 2500th to a 2900th of a second using traditional style. Now I'll give myself a random start here. We'll watch the light and see what the display shows. .27.4, pretty good time. That's traditional style world fast draw. Now the final method of fast draw that I'm going to talk about is Cowboy fast draw. It uses a stock single action revolver, a stock holster, Old West style holster, and the targets are usually 21 feet away, meaning the draw is a lot slower. You got to make sure you get it on the target. Also, you cannot fire behind the holster, so there's no dump draws allowed. You have to come out and go in front of the holster. Now what the fastest way, the best way to hit that target is actually a draw where you're going towards the target as you pull the trigger. That draw usually looks like this. Come out, back, and forward. And I'll try it on the timer, we'll see how fast that is. Now in Cowboy fast draw, they don't keep world records, but a really good time is in the 3/10 of a second, so 3500th to 3900ths of a second. Good time is still in the 4s, or if you're around a 500ths of a second, half a second, that's still a very good time. I will give it a bit of a try here. Again, the gun has to come out and then forward and be firing in front of the holster. Here we go. .34.5, that is pretty fast, but again, I don't have a target out there, so I wasn't aiming, but that's a pretty good time for the Cowboy fast draw. So I hope that gives you times on what fast draw is all about. Low 2/10 of a second to high 2/10 of a second for world fast draw, open and traditional styles. Cowboy fast draw, mid to high 3/10 of a second to 4/10, 5/10, still good competition times. If you want more information on fast draw, try fastdraw.org and cowboyfastdraw.com. If you'd like to have information on how to shoot fast draw, instructional videos, look for gunfighter.com/videos. Look for the fast draw section and the 2 videos by Cal Ulrich, Hit 'em Fast and The Art of Fast Draw. Thank you.